Bienvenidos, Fright fans. Welcome to the horror show. I'm Jaime and Fuego here for a special book review. It's basically the second incarnation of some coverage that Cecil, Laird, and I did about the author Joe Hill. That's right, son of Cy King. For that reason, it's really, I was thinking if I should do this on the Hail to Stephen King set, if I should do all the proper stuff, but, really, I felt like we should do it here because of the fact that Joe definitely set himself apart with both Heart-Shaped Box, the, 20th Century Ghosts, and all of the stuff that he has done. So, he purposefully chose, as a writer, not to use his royal name, I guess, is the best way that I can describe it. And so I was like, I'm going to do it at the Horror Show Studios as opposed to at the Hail to Stephen King Studios. And, so here we are to talk about his 2010 release. And for me, this is the one that, whereas, Heart-Shaped Box was very well received and, musical reference in the title, obviously, and that theme kind of persists through this book as well. But, Horns is where Joe really announced himself to a much bigger audience, especially for the sheer fact that it was adapted into a film just a couple years later. So the initial book came out February 16, 2010, and it was his second novel, his third release overall, and it's this crazy story that, for me, when I first heard about it, and I heard about it because of the fact that Daniel Radcliffe, Mr. Harry Potter, was doing a film adaptation of it, directed by Alexandre Aja, if I remember the guy's name. Yeah, correct. So, he did High Tension, which was a French horror film that I loved all the way up until the stupid twist, which made donuts for sense, and I couldn't forgive it for that. But he also jumped over to America, and he did he became a remake guy there for a moment. So he did the Hills Have Eyes remake, which is actually better than the Wes Craven movie. Come at me in the comments. And he also did Piranha 3D. Come at me in the comments. Better than the original. Both really gory, crazy, unsettling films. He also did Mirrors, which I want to say Kiefer Sutherland. Okay. But I finally got around to watching Horns recently. I know Marcia and Cecil did a review, both spoiler and non-spoiler, of Horns here on the channel a couple of years ago when we were still doing like the season format for the horror show. But I was like, okay, this guy wakes up and he has horns growing out of his head all of a sudden after a night of debaucherous drinking, and he's going through all of this pain and grief from the death of the love of his life, his longtime girlfriend and everything. But I don't know. It was recommended to me very vehemently by an ex-girlfriend, and she was like, this is a romantic, heartbreaking, awesome, so on and so forth. And so that sat in the back of my mind, and it was like, okay, maybe eventually I will get around to watching Horns. And at the recommendation of a lot of other people in the Hail to Stephen King group that I've talked to, yes, shout out to the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, but I finally decided to bite the bullet and watch it, and I got it on Netflix. And that's the funny thing, they still send Netflix in the mail, in case y'all didn't know. That's where I got it, and I loved it so much that I bought it on Blu-ray from Amazon just this past week. I thought it was terrific. There's some silly moments, obviously, but the concept translated a whole lot better, and for me, especially being, the hopeless romantic variety and everything, that aspect translated very, very well. I thought little Harry Potter's performance was great. Juno Temple, I want to say the girl's name is. Yeah, Juno Temple. Beautiful. Very, very talented at conveying, the emotion, and also like the different moments of tension between, her character of Marion and Egg. It's the film was a lot better than I was expecting it to be, but obviously we all know, in pretty much every case, unless you're taking a short story or taking something that's not super, super long form like a novella, the book's always better. And in this case, the book was 100 times better for a story that I already found myself really, really loving just from what I saw on screen. And so the cool thing is, I have to make a few references just to the way Stephen King's son, Joe Hill, Joseph Hillstrom King, okay? And he's like, you know what? I'm going to go at it alone. I'm not going to tell anybody I'm Stephen King's son. I'm going to start calling myself Joe Hill. I'm not going to use the royal name like Owen did. Yeah, Owen, I just threw you right under the bus, dude. but it's like he wanted to do it on his own, and I respect the hell out of that so incredibly much. And when he was initially trying to get stuff published, he was actually outed in a similar amusing fashion to his father. I did a Hail to Stephen King episode called Hail to the Hill, which was essentially, and I had other people telling me that I should start doing separate videos about Joe Hill. Shout out to a buddy of mine, Andreas, who was like, you should call it Run to the Hills and make it all about the Joe Hill stuff. Who likes that idea? I don't know, it's a thought. But I know Cecil loves Lock and Key, which was the comic series that he did. He also did Nosferatu, The Fireman recently. Strange Weather, I want to say, is the most recent thing that just won the Bram Stoker Award. So he is legit celebrated at this point. But I just cannot sing the praises enough about the fact that you can see some of his dad's influence and some of his characterization and the examples that he uses. Like, he'll describe a situation and he'll be like, yeah, they were, running into the melee like, punk rockers running into the pit at a show. He really injects a lot of musicality in his storytelling. And horns is a double meaning here. Horns is not just the horns growing out of Ignatius's head and goes by Ig, but it's also for the fact that he comes from a family of horn players, playing the horn, the trumpet, and stuff. Father, very popular, met his mom when, she was like a showgirl dancer or whatever in Vegas when he was performing there. His older brother, Terry, I want to say, yeah, Terry Parrish, he's like this late night booning show host kind of guy, which they really don't touch upon very much, if at all, in the movie, at least not like extensively. It's been a little while since I've watched the movie now, so the book is a lot more fresh, but he's like a late night host, Ig's older brother, very successful. He's honestly, think of if the dudes from the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones on I don't even know if they're still Kimmel's band, but if they were like hosting the actual show themselves, and kind of like what you saw with Sinatra, and bringing on all his buddies, Sammy Davis and Dean Martin and everything like that. Like, just imagine if you had a late night musical personality and they're reworking songs for the house band, and they're bringing guests on, and it's like talk show format and stuff like that. That's essentially what Terry does. And Ig is very musical himself too, but unfortunately, not as musically as inclined as his brother. But story-wise, if we're just going to jump into this without me spoiling too much, and once again, I make these book reviews non-spoiler, and I don't want to just go into too much craziness and divulge too many plot details, but you have to at least understand the framing device of the fact that, it was rich, well-to-do family, very successful father on the musical side of things, brother that followed in the footsteps. He tried, didn't have the lung capacity. There's a few other things that they go into about that. But so he meets this girl as he's growing up, which we learn a lot more about in flashbacks and stuff, because the book starts present day, him waking up, having horns all of a sudden protruding from his forehead. His chick, who is like his bang buddy, Glenna. Yeah, I was thinking Glenda for some reason, the good witch. But yeah, so he's got Glenna, this chick who he's basically been, shacking up and shagging since his girlfriend was mysteriously murdered. He's been accused of the crime, but there's no evidence and stuff, and so it's still kind of an ongoing thing hanging over his head. A lot of people think he did it, but no proof. So, but Marin, the love of his life, his long time girlfriend, the woman that he thought he was going to marry and have children with and all this other stuff, he met when he was a teenager, very, very young teenager, and like just starting high school kind of thing. And she moves from another town. She's like flashing across in church to him, trying to get his attention, trying to like get the little reflection of the sun like coming at him and everything. And she does indeed succeed, and she gets his attention, and the love kind of blossoms from there. But there is a third-party factor, and the third-party factor is in this guy named Lee, and just to double check, Lee Turneau or whatever, but opposite of Ig, completely. Lives in a trailer, not into music, just more so into mischief and wanting to wanting to blow things up. There's some stuff with, cherry bombs that play like a big part in the storytelling and stuff like that. And Ig can't even wrap his head around the fact that somebody could not be in the music, him coming from this musical family. And so he gives him CDs, and they end up striking up this unlikely friendship, but you're still waiting in the wings the possibility that Lee has... They both kind of have feelings for the girl initially, and then Marin ends up making it plain and clear that, Ig is the one that she wants, and then they have this lengthy relationship kind of thing. And so it's really pretty. It genuinely is. And just to get back to the structuring that I was trying to make mention of, Joe divides it into 50 chapters, and so he goes 10 different chapters, 50 chapters, but 5 different sections, okay? And so you've got 10 different chapters in each of these 5 sections. It starts out in Hell, and then it goes to Cherry, and Cherry is the flashback stuff, and then, we go into the Fire Sermon, and then we go into the Fixer, and then lastly, and this is where there's more of the purveying, just musical mentality that I love so much about this book. You have the Gospel according to Mick and Keith, yeah. And that ties in even more so with the fact that Ig, when Marin is kind of trying to signal him with the cross and ends up, breaking off and turning into a plot point, when he picks it up and he wants to fix it for her and everything. It's just interesting because he thinks she is trying to send him Morse code, like flashing stuff like that. And there is Morse code in the hardcover. So within the hardcover, in like the front and the back, like, where the little leaflet area is, there's like the little dashes. And so apparently they're saying over and over and over, pleased to meet you, hope you guess my name. And that's, once again, a purveying theme in this, is the fact that, Ig becomes a devil, and he becomes a devil with powers. Once he gets those horns, when he wakes up, that morning, he has this ability of persuasion, of suggestion, and various other things. I don't want to really get into spoiling too very much. I mean, he goes... It's almost like everyone's inhibitions when they come into contact with him, they are completely honest about, whether it's, when he goes to the doctor and the doctor wants to bang down the nurse and he's talking about doing blow and all this other stuff, or where, the 2 partnered cops are wanting to, have sexy time with each other, these 2 guys. Totally cool. Don't let your inhibitions and how you think society is going to perceive you constrain you, obviously. Don't do that. But it's just, it's presented for comedic effect, and it actually shows the bonkers weirdness of this book in the fact that those are the scenarios. So it starts out with, and even when he goes to his parents' house, that's actually some of the rougher ones. So, yeah, parents saying, they say alcohol's the truth serum, and yet I've had other people argue with me, and they're just like, no, I'm not myself when I'm drunk, and everybody's like, are you more yourself? Is it the truth serum or whatever? I don't know. That's an argument for another day, unfortunately. But nonetheless, it's just very interesting because that's kind of the approach that this takes when he's in contact with people, and then we learn that there is a catch and there is a way for his particular powers not to affect certain people in certain situations, without spoiling things. But yeah, it's a cool gimmick that, starts the story off well, and then we jump to the flashback stuff in Cherry, and that's when we learn about, just him meeting Marin, and Ig's just growing friendship with Lee, and how all of that stuff goes down, and it's fascinating to me. So all this takes place in Gideon, New Hampshire. I doubt that's a real place, obviously, but it's just I keep clearing my throat because Cecil and I have done like over a dozen trailer reactions, and so I've just been talking. So sorry guys, thank you for bearing with. But it's so it's still kind of taking place in the New England-y-ish area, that his father just kind of roams around and whatnot. But I love how, at least with this second book, Hill continued to build the Hill verse, and I guess it does even tie in with his father's verse, because I've heard that third novel, Nosferatu, makes references to the Crimson King and the Tower and all these other things. He mentions Derry in this book. He mentions Derry. Well, I can't remember if they mention it as Derry, Maine, but they say Derry in there, and you just gotta figure people are gonna be going nutsoid if you know it's King's son and you hear that. But for me, I probably got the most excited when they were talking about Terry, his older brother, being at this big bonfire with all these other kids, this ritualistic thing that happens all the time where everybody's partying and whatnot. And they talk about listening to Judas Coin, and Judas Coin is the main character from Heart-Shaped Box, this aging goth musician. And so Hill has taken notes from his father about world building and just building a Hillverse, and that's super dope to me. And so, I don't know, as things progress on, it just gets increasingly heartbreaking. The film adapts things very, very well, I must admit. It's pretty faithful. I mean, the only stuff that you really don't get as much about is like the Lee backstory. And the Lee backstory, you know, what would Ig do? You know, where he's such... even though he comes from, you know, the whole white trash, whatever, which is such a horrible term, but comes from poverty and, you know, a problematic home situation and stuff like that. And he is the polar opposite of Ig. He's very sharply opportunistic, which is really, really scary to think about. And we get all of this background about his political aspirations and, you know, just like working within the political field and stuff like that. Not so much wanting to be a politician, but he's just the guy who defends Ig in the film. But boy, they go into how nasty of a person he genuinely is, and just the extent of his aspirations to get Marin and what he thinks is going to happen, and that stuff is really compelling. So I just cannot recommend enough checking out this book, especially if you enjoyed the movie. The movie is terrific, and if you liked that, you will just get, it's like getting, the movie was the Cliff Notes, and this is like the full scope of everything, guys. So I gotta extend a grande gracias to everybody who is tuned into this. If you have any interest in talking, you know, Further Hill or Cy King, as I call him, there's the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, and make sure to subscribe here to The Horror Show, where we do 2 to 3 episodes a day. Yeah, ring the bell, make sure that you get all of the indications about all of the badassness that we do here on this channel. And so I've been Jaime and Fuego, and until next time, remember, stay scared, and in this case, read Joe Hill.